Imagine the cold, not the chill of a winter morning, but a deep, relentless cold that seeps into your bones and steals the warmth from your very soul. Imagine being buried alive under 40 feet of snow, your food gone, your hope fading, with only the ghosts of the pines for company. This is not a campfire story. This is what happened in the Sierra Nevada in the winter of 1846. A group of men, women, and children, 81 souls in all, set out for a new life in California. They called themselves the Donner Party, but history remembers them by a different name, a grimmer name. This is the story of how civilization unravels. This is the story of the cannibal kingdom by the lake. Our story begins not in snow, but in dust, in the spring of 1846 in Springfield, Illinois. The promise of California was a siren song, a land of eternal sunshine and boundless opportunity that called to prosperous farmers like George Donner and his brother Jacob. They were optimistic, outfitting their families with fine wagons and ample supplies to join the great migration west. The established route was brutal but known, yet they were seduced by a lie, a book promising a shortcut called the Hastings Cutoff, which claimed to shave hundreds of miles off their journey. It was a decision that would seal their fate, a choice that would lead them into a trap of their own making. The land fought back almost immediately after they split from the main trail. The Wasatch Mountains were a tangled nightmare of canyons and thickets where no proper trail existed, forcing the party to carve their own path through the wilderness. Men swung axes until their hands blistered and bled, felling trees and moving boulders for days on end, sometimes making only a mile or two of progress. This critical delay drained their energy and their supplies, pushing them closer to the deadly Sierra winter with every passing day. Then came the Salt Desert, a blinding white plain that stretched for 80 miles instead of the promised 40, where their wagons sank into the soft crust and waterholes were dry, leading to the loss of precious oxen and the abandonment of their worldly possessions, scattered like bones across the alkali waste.
The strain of their disastrous choices began to show in violent ways. A quarrel between James Reed and a teamster named John Snyder escalated into a deadly confrontation, ending with Reed plunging a knife into Snyder's chest. Their makeshift society faced a crisis, banishing Reed into the wilderness as punishment, leaving his wife and children to continue without him. Then, the land delivered its final blow before the mountains. The Paiute tribes, defending their resources, attacked the vulnerable party, stampeding and killing most of their remaining oxen with a cloud of arrows. This loss was a catastrophe. The last of their food was on the hoof, and now it was gone, leaving them starved and broken as they faced the towering Sierra Nevada. It was late October when they began their ascent, and the sky made its intentions clear with a cold rain that turned to sleet, then to heavy, wet snow. They struggled upwards towards a pass called Truckee, now known as Donner Pass, but the snow was relentless, piling up faster than they could push through. On the night of October 31st, they made one final desperate attempt to breach the summit, only to find the snow 10 feet deep and impassable. Forced to admit defeat, they retreated to a small, frozen lake at the foot of the pass, where they hastily constructed crude shelters, log cabins, and snow caves that would become their prison, their world shrinking to the size of a single smoky room filled with the smell of despair. November turned into December, and the snowpack grew to unimaginable depths, trapping them in a white tube. They consumed their oxen, then the boiled hides of their shelters, then twigs, bark, and bones boiled until they splintered into nothing. Patrick Dolan was the first to openly suggest the unthinkable. What if someone died? The suggestion was met with horror and revulsion, for they were still people of God and civilization. But the body has a will that the mind cannot control, and when the first members began to die, their bodies were buried in the snowdrifts, a temporary measure against the hunger that gnawed at them all. A storm of apocalyptic fury struck in mid-December, the worst any of them had ever seen, raging for days and sealing them in completely. It was during this storm that the first barrier broke.
after Patrick Dolan succumbed to the cold and delirium, his body lay among the living in the cramped cabin. The conversation was no longer theoretical. It was a matter of mathematics, of survival. They butchered his body and roasted his flesh over the fire in a silent, grim ceremony. The horror was not in the act itself, but in the quiet, methodical way it was done, stripping away the last vestige of their old world. At Alder Creek, the Donner families were in an even more dire situation. George Donner was incapacitated by a severe hand infection, and his wife Tamsen became the sole caretaker for him, their children, and Jacob Donner's family. When Jacob died, it was Tamsen who made the impossible choice, preserving his body to feed the children. She crossed her own Rubicon, a mother's love justifying a monstrous act to keep her little ones alive a little longer, embodying the terrible paradox of their existence, where the deepest love required the deepest sacrifice. By Christmas, with 15 people dead at the lake camps, a group of 17 of the strongest members formed the Forlorn Hope, a final, desperate bid to cross the mountains and find help. They fashioned snowshoes from oxhide and sticks, setting out with 6 days' rations for a journey they knew would take weeks. This expedition quickly became a death march through a featureless white hell, where they got lost, their snowshoes failed, and their rations vanished, leaving them trapped by another blizzard in a snow camp that became an altar for their final covenant. Starving and freezing, the Forlorn Hope made a pact. If one of them died, the others would use their body to sustain those who still had a chance. It was no longer about scavenging from the already dead. It was a promise to let death nourish life. The first to go was Antonio, and his death was a somber relief. Then, as the food ran out again, 2 Native American boys died and were consumed. The unthinkable then happened. The suggestion of a lottery, drawing sticks to see who would be shot to feed the others, a proposal that was rejected but revealed the depth of their moral dissent. The line between the living and the dead was erased entirely when Lemuel Murphy, a teenager, slipped into a coma. His sister Mary watched in frozen horror as the living began to cut flesh from her still breathing brother. They survived on the bodies of their companions for weeks, a ghastly procession winding its way through the mountains, their humanity eroding with every step. Only 7 of the 17 Forlorn Hope members survived to stumble into a Miwok village near the foothills, more skeletons than people, their eyes hollow with unspeakable memories. Back at the lakes, the waiting had become its own form of torture. The first rescue party, led by Aquila Glover in February, arrived to a scene from a nightmare. The shelters were silent, surrounded by dismembered and butchered corpses, and the survivors were feral, their minds shattered. Lewis Keseberg was found in a cabin littered with human remains, a pot of liver and lungs boiling over his fire, seemingly content in his damnation. The rescuers, hardened men, were psychologically scarred by what they saw, forced to make impossible choices about who to save. The rescues were a chaotic, multi-stage affair, each party battling the still deep snow and vicious weather to bring out a handful of emaciated survivors. The first party could only take the children, leaving others behind, including Tamsen Donner, who refused to abandon her dying husband. As the rescuers led the survivors back over the pass, they faced new horrors, carrying weak children every step of the way through the freezing landscape, their mission a race against time and death. When the fourth relief party arrived in mid-April, the snow was finally melting, revealing the full, grisly tableau of the camps. They found George Donner dead in his bed at Alder Creek, and Tamsen was gone, having perished after finally setting out on her own. The last survivor they found was Lewis Keseberg, alone in his cabin, surrounded by the evidence of his survival.
He was accused of murdering Tamsen Donner for food, a charge he denied until his dying day, though he openly admitted to cannibalism, stating he found her dead in the snow and used her body to survive. Of the 81 original members trapped in the mountains, only 45 survived, emerging physically and mentally broken into a California that viewed them with a mixture of pity and horror. They tried to rebuild their lives, but they were forever marked, followed by whispers and the stench of the taboo. Their story became a national sensation, a grotesque cautionary tale about the perils of the frontier and the fragility of the human spirit, a stark reminder of how thin the veneer of civilization truly is.
But some say the story did not end with the last rescue. Later travelers, passing by the serene waters of what is now called Donner Lake, reported strange sights in the twilight. Pale, emaciated figures, barely visible between the trees, their hands outstretched, silently begging for food. Phantom campfires that give no heat, and the echo of a child's cry on the wind are said to haunt the area. The Sierra Nevada does not give up its dead so easily, and the Donner Party achieved a terrible kind of immortality. They are a permanent stain on the American landscape, a ghostly kingdom forever trapped in the snow, still waiting for a rescue that will never come. Their legacy is not just one of historical tragedy, but of enduring folklore, a chilling testament to the extremes of human endurance and the psychological shadows that such trauma casts, lingering in the collective memory of a nation and forever echoing in the silent, snowy forests of the High Sierras.